Hello, this is Chef John from foodwishes.com with Great Apple Crisp. That's right, according to a recent made-up study, the main reason people listed for not making an apple crisp was the peel and core and slice and prep on the apples. Well, thanks to this new great technique, that is no longer a valid excuse. So with that, let's go ahead and get started with my double entendre. Since this great technique involves grating the apples instead of peeling and slicing them, which is not only faster, but definitely better for people that don't have great knife skills. And what we'll do is grate 6 apples into a bowl, and I'm using Honeycrisp, but please feel free to use whatever you want. I mean, you are after all the Johnny Appleseed, of which apple to use for this deed. And the only thing to look out for here is to not grate in too far. And a great tip for how to tell if you've gone too far is you're going to see seeds in the bowl, which we don't want, so don't go that far. And then once we have our apples grated, we'll squeeze in the juice of 1 lemon. And I guess you could add the zest if you wanted, but for me that might give it a little too pronounced of a lemon flavor. And here we're going for mostly the acidity, with just a little hint of lemon flavor. And once that's in, we'll add a little touch of cinnamon, plus a very small touch of cornstarch, just to help tighten up those juices a little bit. And that's it. We'll finish this up with some white sugar, as well as some light brown sugar, at which point we'll take a spoon and give this a thorough mixing. And by the way, if all you have is dark brown sugar, you can use that. For recipes like this, light brown and regular dark brown sugar are pretty much interchangeable, and the only difference is that the dark has more of a molasses flavor. But anyway, the point is they both will work. And no matter which you use, make sure everything's mixed in very evenly. And once it is, we will stop and transfer this into a buttered baking dish. As in a very, very generously buttered baking dish, like a couple tablespoons. And you can and probably should do this ahead of time. Alright, I decided to start the video by showing you the apple prep, since that is slightly more exciting than watching someone butter a dish to open a video. But it's generally a good idea to have that stuff prepped before you start a recipe. In any event, once that's greased, we'll go ahead and transfer our apple mixture in, and we will distribute and spread that out as evenly as we can. And by the way, raise your hand if you needed that instruction, and you were actually going to pile it all up on one side. I know you weren't, but that's just something people like me say. And then once that's been accomplished, we can move on to our topping, which starts with one ingredient that goes in just about everybody's recipe for apple crisp, which would be some rolled oats, followed by an ingredient that's in almost nobody's recipe, and that would be some grape nuts. Oh yeah, the cereal. And while it is true no one really knows what grape nuts are, we all know what they aren't, which would be nuts from grapes. But whatever they are, they work great in toppings like this. And then to that we will add some all-purpose flour, as well as some white and brown sugar, followed by a small but very important pinch of salt. Oh yeah, don't forget the salt, which I think I did in the apple crisp video I posted over a decade ago. And that's it. We'll finish up with an entire stick of melted butter. And once that's in, we'll take a spoon and give this a thorough mix. And I really do want you to take your time here. Okay, not just because stirring things are relaxing and therapeutic, but also we want to make sure every rolled oat and every single grape nut is coated evenly with the butter. So take your time and do a very thorough and thoughtful job. And that's it. Once properly mixed, we'll spoon that over the top, and we'll distribute that as evenly as we can. I know you wanted to pile it all up in one spot, but don't. And then after I had that spread over, I did something I don't want you to do. I went around with the tip of my spoon, and I poked some of that down into that juicy apple mixture, which at the time seemed like a smart thing to do. But as it turns out, I think we want to leave everything right on top, so it comes out a little crispier for you. Right, using grated apples instead of sliced apples for this was a new thing for me, so I was learning on the fly. But anyway, once that's topped, it's ready to transfer into the center of a 375-degree oven for about an hour, or until our apple filling's firmed up and the top is golden brown and crisp, and it hopefully looks like this. And then if you want, you can serve this up piping hot. But personally, I do think it's better taste and texture-wise if you let it cool down. So I did let mine sit there for a while before I served some up. And at this point it was just barely warm. Right, just barely warm enough to slightly melt the next ingredient, which of course would be a scoop of vanilla ice cream. And no, not a big scoop. A nice small restaurant scoop. I know you're going to put more on at home. That's fine. And that's it. I finished up with a completely unnecessary sprig of mint. Although, to be fair, that might be the best looking sprig of mint in the history of YouTube videos. And if it isn't, I love to see the one that is. But anyway, I grabbed a spoon and went in for the official taste. And I could not have been happier with how this came out. Right, I love the flavor of a classic apple crisp. But what I don't always love is the texture of those larger slices of apples you get under the crisp. Which is why I was really excited to try this grating technique. And it really did work out amazingly well. Okay, those little shreds of apple still have a little bit of texture to them, but the overall mouthfeel is much more luxurious. And we're almost getting like apple butter vibes from this, which if you're not familiar, is when we cook down apples for a really, really long time, with lots of sugar and some butter, and it turns into this rich brown sweet and tangy paste that's one of the most delicious things you'll ever eat. Well, that's kind of what we have going on here, except it's topped with all this crumbly, crispy goodness. Which reminds me, my only dilemma here is that the topping is definitely crispier when it's freshly baked, so I probably enjoy that part of this better when it's warm. But as far as the apple component underneath, I definitely enjoy that part more when it's cold. Right, once it's cold, it's very jam-like, which is why I compared it to apple butter earlier, and I just enjoy the balance of the flavors a little more when this is chilled. But anyway, suit yourself. And no matter what temperature you enjoy this at, I really do think this technique is great. Pun intended. And I really, really do hope you give this a try soon. So please follow the links below for the ingredient amounts, a printable written recipe, and much more info as usual. And as always, enjoy.